I now have Stephen Bentley, who's a social innovator and community animator at Ryerson University.
CSI, but my degree is from
Now
Ryerson.
CSI, degrees from Ryerson. All right. Stephen has had a history of change making throughout institutional and private sector engagement. Professionally, he is an urban planner, but he's applying his knowledge within the social enterprise space. He has had a wide range of experiences, including award-winning consulting work with social enterprises who work both locally and internationally, from Ecuador to Tanzania. Stephen has acted as a union board of director at Ryerson University. He co-founded his own social enterprise, carrot.ca, an online marketplace that connects local organic farmers with restaurant managers. And Carrot went on to become one of the Center for Social Innovation's Youth Agents of Change Award winners in 2012. Currently, Stephen is working with Community Forests International, a volunteer-driven social enterprise working to connect people and their communities to the forests that sustain them. Let's look forward to hear his wonderful journey of entrepreneurship and the change award that he won for his company. And he will also try to connect with change management, what we heard in the earlier session. Please help me welcome Stephen.
This is my entire presentation. This one pager. I didn't actually make a presentation, so we'll just skip to questions. Just kidding. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Lalit, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you again for even just having me. I feel very honored to be speaking here with Sept and Leela, two very decorated and experienced change makers and change managers. Today, I'd like to speak about making change as an agent of change within my brief experience as a social entrepreneur, but longer experience with dealing with social innovators and entrepreneurs. I would like to first talk about invention and end up using my skills as an agent of change, both within organizations and without. Within, I call them intrapreneurs, and without, I call them entrepreneurs. And sometimes you're not either, but you're just a change maker. I use the same process over and over again. Trained as an urban planner, I have been given a certain superpower with X-ray vision to be able to look through walls and see the city and its metabolism in a very different way. My process is usually to do with 80% of what I do is listening, empathizing, working as a social worker, in a sense. The next, once I've listened enough, then I go on to context. I try to contextualize what people are going through, what are the pain points, what is the suffering, where is it coming from? And I try and re-angle that so that I can guide them. That process is the entrepreneurial process. And I think that in the future, we're going to be needing a lot more of that, because currently, we're in the information age, and there's way too much information. Too much for us to handle. And so we need people to empathize with us. These kind of jobs are going to be more and more important in the future, because it's what's human. And this is what Sept began to mention, and I'm glad that he did right at the end of his presentation, is that commercial life and social life are the same life, because business doesn't exist without people. And if you don't understand people, you don't understand business. So I want to talk about three major topics of which I've had some sort of experience with or without. And the first is invention. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a fellow named Nikola Tesla. He was a famous inventor who came from Europe, and he actually ended up working with Thomas Edison in New York. And he ended up innovating how we use energy within his company. And eventually, a few years later, or later in his life, he ended up moving to Colorado Springs and working on his own inventions, namely the Tesla coil. And the Tesla coil would be centered over an aquifer, and it would bring in what they call radiant energy, energy from space, something that you can't see. It just came from, I don't even know how it works, but essentially what he invented was free energy. And people didn't really like that, some people. And so, long story short with Nikola Tesla was that he invented in isolation, and that unfortunately was his downfall. My experience with invention is not as an inventor, but as a reinventor of myself. My story as a change maker actually starts just like this butterfly does. You see, when I was younger, when I was in elementary school, I was actually not a change maker. I was quite apathetic. I brought home C's and D's, and I wasn't quite really good at anything. And there was a lot of frustration going on at home with my parents going through a divorce. And I decided I needed to channel my energy so that I could focus on something that I could see immediate feedback on, something that I could achieve and feel like I have some self-worth. And so I became in love with fighting. Not fighting in the schoolyard, but in the ring. I actually became an amateur kickboxer. And I dedicated myself and my energy to reinventing myself, seeing myself in different scenarios, where for 4.5 years, I became the most consistent athlete at Nomad Dojo. I ended up competing in local tournaments and regional tournaments, onto provincial, and eventually actually onto the national ring. And here is where, in the unknown for me, my character was forged. Because going into the nationals for me was so scary and so real that on my first fight I actually lost. I lost all of that hard work. 99% of the time that I spent on training my muscles and on training my mind, I actually lost. But a miracle happened. My coach went up to me and he said, "Steve, there's actually the opportunity of a lifetime. Someone actually dropped out at the last minute, and there's an opportunity to fight in the next tier. It's an age group above you, and it's a weight class above you, but you can fight again." And I said, "Yes, I just want another opportunity to fight. That's all I need." And so I went, and I lost horribly this time, even more than I did the last time. And that's okay, because this story isn't about me winning. This story is about the beginning of me seeing myself in a different light, where I was able to make change in my own life. I ended up accomplishing so much to get to the nationals, that when I took that energy of, I can change something in my life, I used that energy eventually within university to gain vested interest around social justice. And so eventually I began to understand the principles of making social change. And I replugged my newfound energy, my newfound inspiration into others. But the perspective is very important of the person making the change. And that's where the intrapreneurship comes in, is you can be an employee and not make any change. If you say, hand me the work and I'll do it, However, if you are an employee with the mindset of an entrepreneur, you say, I've already done this work. I didn't quite ask permission, but we already have this event happening. Do you want to join in, director, da 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 da? And they say, wow, you've already made the change. That's excellent. And I'll give you a great example of that. Downtown Toronto, Ryerson is very much a part of the urban fabric. And something that I saw a definite need for, and many other students saw, that I helped encourage, was urban agriculture. On our campus, I ended up doing this survey, this market research, if you will, throughout all of the students. And we saw that people didn't enjoy the food that was currently being served for many reasons. They felt food insecure. Food security was not being dealt with in the right way. And so several students from the nutrition program actually spearheaded a new urban garden. And this was like a symbol of hope. So we started this urban garden, and I helped water the seeds of this new growth. And what was interesting was a lot of the different plants actually ended up missing. Eggplants, this, that, and the other. We just didn't know where they went. And on the opening day of the Ryerson homegrown urban agriculture, our president, Sheldon Levy, said he noticed that all these plants were missing. And he said, well, you know what? A lot of people told me that we shouldn't do this urban agriculture garden because it interferes with the foliage and the flowers and the things that we have going on, the beautification of this campus, and it looks very ugly. But on the other hand, he found that actually people were eating these plants and veggies. So people must need them. There must be a need for them, and maybe we need to actually grow more urban gardens. And so the story of reinvention for myself, plugging myself into others, actually begins to evolve and turn into a story of innovation. And I'm not sure if any of you recognize me in my latter years, but this is actually Herbert Spencer. And in 1859, he was the one who basically revolutionized our education system as we knew it. In the midst of the Industrial Revolution, he was the only one who really asked, what is it worth knowing in our educational framework? Should we be learning about Latin and Greek, or maybe should we be focusing more on sciences? And he put that forward, and now that's really the reason why everyone after that cohort, that wave of youth around that time started to learn different things and implement it in a different way, and hence became the Industrial Revolution. He wasn't an entrepreneur and he wasn't an inventor, but he was a change maker. Because he believed in something, he saw the vision, and he didn't care who was in his way. He spoke with conviction. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever actually seen one, but on the PowerPoint here is a black swan. I have actually never seen one until I Googled it. And they don't exist in Canada or in Europe. And they haven't existed really in the human mind for a very, very long time, until a fellow named Wilhelm de Vlaming, an explorer, went to Australia. He went down a river, and he said, oh my God, is that swan covered in oil, or is that swan actually black? Yeah. And the important notion here is that the discovery didn't change or revolutionize new businesses or change the way we do things, but it changed the way we thought about things. And this is what Nassim Taleb made his entire book about it, the Black Swan Theory. And this is something I am a very fond student of, social movements and Black Swan theory. Because a black swan is an event in history and in time where you just don't know how it happened, but it ended up changing the world. Like the internet, like the computer, like anything worth remembering, an artistic accomplishment. There are just so many factors that you just can't predict when the next black swan event is going to occur. Except in hindsight, and this is what Nassim spoke of in his book, is in hindsight we see the patterns of change unfolding, where people not necessarily take ownership over something, but when they share something, like the internet. It took so many different programmers and inventors to really fund the internet. It took both government and private sector to make it really happen and make it into what it is now. Same with the computer. There was an investor and a fellow who, I can't remember his name, but he basically owned a large energy corporation which has a different name now, back in the 1800s. And he was given an opportunity to invest in computers. And he said, I probably see place for about 1 or 5 in the world. Because he didn't see that it wasn't just for computer programmers. He didn't see that it could be for everyone, to connect with everyone. And so this personal revolution starts to turn into an external revolution. And invention starts to turn into innovation, and innovation starts to unfold where entrepreneurs see a movement happening, and there are margins. And they look towards organizing a lasting social impact around organizational behavior. That's really what entrepreneurship is to me, and that's what I find fascinating. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is CFI. I'm going to keep this presentation pretty quick and short because I'd like your feedback and talk about things. I find myself more of a facilitator, and with Community Forests International, ever since 2006, we have planted over 1 million. Actually, they have, I haven't, but the organization has planted over 1 million trees. We've worked with over 1,800 penguins in Tanzania, with over 30 different types of trees. And what we see here is not an individual that made change, or not 3 ladies, and not a tree that grew sporadically, but before, if you could see, it was a vast wasteland. It was very dry because people had certain knowledge that was limiting and that provided scarcity. But when our executive director, Jeff Schnur, ended up there, word got around and someone said, hey, I heard you're a tree planter. We need some help planting trees. Can you help us? And he said, yeah, sure, I'll help it out in any way I can. And they assembled the community and they said, one woman actually spoke up. She said, trees are great, but what we really need is water. And so it started to unfold. Okay, what do we really need? And long story short, the CFI up to date has basically harnessed whatever the main problem is in that community, or in communities in Canada and Tanzania. There's no problem too big or too small for us to just say, how can I help? And how can we interlink people? Because what we've done here is we've interlinked communities to share seeds and to start planting and to start a conversation that penguins and Tanzanians are actually the experts. Jeff Schnur, nor I, nor anyone at CFI coming from Canada or elsewhere view international development as we are the experts, we have the answers, and we're coming to help you. He used facilitation in a way that what we're working on now is building a rural innovation campus. We have something that they don't, but they have something much greater that we need. And they are solving climate change right now. They're the experts, and leaders from around Africa have come to this node to ask, how did you do it? The EU has approached us and they said, what you've done here is one of the most socially impactful projects in all of Africa. And so we're going to offer you $300,000. But here's the catch. You have to fund 10% of it. So currently we're raising 30 grand, which in essence is actually 300 grand, to build a rural innovation campus. You see, I see this as an opportunity to learn from the experts, to leverage and empower the people that are our teachers. Where innovation doesn't necessarily have to happen in an urban core, it can actually happen in a farmland. And that reconciliation process is about merging forests and people, and agroforests with people. And so we lead into a story about a lady at CFI. If we have time, I actually have a video so you can actually see it and see people's faces and of the change that they've made for themselves. One of the problems that was encountered in the community was people used 3 rocks and firewood to cook anything. And this was a very wasteful way of burning fuel, and it sought a lot of dust and smoke into people's faces, and it just wasn't fun. So one of the people in the community noticed that another lady had reinvented something for herself. She had modeled a way of actually creating this, it's like a pot, it's like a clay pot that you can put your pot on top of, and you put the fire within the pot, and it has a ventilation, thank you, ventilation system within it. So it actually saves more wood that we would otherwise be burning down or cutting down. And it saves time, it increases efficiency, and what has happened is CFI gave a platform to this lady to teach 20 other ladies, and those 20 ladies created over 2,000 of these pots. And it's creating an amazing conversation in the area and in other communities, and they're sharing best practices now. And it's saving a lot of time and energy, and now they can do other things and work on higher level priorities. And so what I'd like to kind of maybe allude to before I go into the video is insanity. What is insanity? Insanity, Einstein would say, maybe you've heard this quote before, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. But what are we here to talk about today? Social change. What I learned was change management, or as an agent of change, it's actually the study of leadership. Because to be able to self-lead and to show others that they can lead, you take initiative. You don't care what others think or what others permit you to do. You just take action because you have empathized. And from that empathy, you move on to context. And from contextualizing a problem, you move into guiding them. These people have guided me. They've inspired me because when I graduated university, I thought I had to be an urban planner. Being trained as an urban planner, I have to be what I sought out to be. But for some reason, I just felt it wasn't right. And the change that I saw within an organization, I saw was possible without an organization. And so I sought to start my own social enterprise and co-found Carrot.ca. And I thought, and many people thought, that's crazy. You can't do that. But it's not insane though, right? Craziness is going into the unknown and realizing you're here alone. Craziness is, if you have a dream, then just realize you can protect it. If someone else tries to put you down, then think about what Einstein said, you know? For anything to change, something has to move. Something has to happen. Be that happening. Be that movement. Be that change. So that you can start your own personal revolution. So that you can lead others through the change and make disruptive change. So that you can be the student and dream and learn forever. Because as soon as you start to think as always being the teacher, then you don't see the opportunity that's right in front of your eyes. If there's one thing I can really give to you today, other than stats and numbers of social impact, it's that passion has an interesting way of defying logic. If you always define things in logic, you don't see the crazy opportunity in front of you.
Is a tropical island located off the east coast of Africa in the Indian Ocean. Over the course of its 2,000-year history of habitation, small-scale fishing and farming has slowly depleted the island's capacity to support its over 300,000 inhabitants. Since Community Forest International's first planting projects in 2008, Penguins have planted over 1 million trees, comprising 30 different species. These local nurseries are economic and environmental catalysts to whole-scale community transformation, all owned and operated by local communities.
I'm Jeff Schneider. I'm an executive director of Community Forest International. Through planting trees, Penguins transformed an entire landscape, but we realized that planting trees was kind of the last act. First, there were so many other community issues that needed to be solved. We went to a small island off of Pemba called Kokoda, and we asked them if they wanted to plant trees, and everyone was really excited about that opportunity, but a woman stood up and she said, yeah, trees are great, but first we need water. The European Union came and checked out some of our work. They saw communities planting trees. They saw, the power of these communities working together, and they wanted to continue to support that innovation in order to help these communities adapt. Kokoda opened our eyes, and we realized that communities were facing so many other challenges. Penguins built a massive rainwater harvesting system that allowed them to capture and store water for the dry season. Nobody had electricity, so we worked with the community to develop a solar energy system that allowed each individual to show up, charge a motorcycle battery, return to their home, plug it in, and get light. Penguins took it one step further, and they started paying each time they used the system because they knew they had to maintain it. Other innovations include agroforestry, beekeeping, compressed bricks, and condensed organic waste material as a charcoal substitute. Each innovation created an entire industry. It allowed Penguins to become more resilient and diversify how they made their living. In one case, a woman revolutionized cooking. She came up with an elegant clay stove design that uses half the amount of wood as the traditional style of cooking.
Kwa kweli nilikuwa napata shida sana kwa sababu majiko matatu nilikuwa nasumbuka moshi, masinzi yatanikisha kupika, majivu, yani joto mwilini, sina raha, hakuna lile lakini sasa hivi yani nina uwezo wa kumpigia mtu ninayempenda katika simu yangu nikamsikiliza na tukafurahi kabisa. Yani ni raha na starehe sana. Lakini jiko hili la kuni linasumbua sana na majiko matatu. Lakini hili nalifurahia kweli kweli.
She trained 20 women. They went back to the villages and they trained another 140 individuals and made 600 stoves.
The EU is blown away by CFI's work, and they want to help Pembins share it with the world. For every dollar raised, the EU will contribute $9. So imagine, if $1 equals 1 Earth brick, with the EU's support, that 1 brick becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, and 100 becomes 1,000. These bricks and these funds will be used to build a rural innovation campus. This campus will allow Pembins to invite community leaders from around the world to come learn Pembin-style change and perhaps make it their own.
It's inspiring. Imagine if the solution to climate change came from the people that need it the most.
Thank you everyone for your time and attention.
Questions?
How about comments or crunchy?
Yeah, out there. How'd you get involved with CFI, like Community Forces Action? And why? Why do you think what they're doing is important?
Can you hear me if I just talk like this?
Yeah.
So CFI actually was introduced to me through several intermediaries. One in particular, a fellow named Craig Applegath introduced me to the executive director. And I had been working with Craig on numerous events for several years called the Symbiotic Cities Network. This is a network of urban planners, engineers, and architects that get together, talk about big picture problems, and start designing solutions to them. And I met Craig and all of this through a presentation that I did at the National Canadian Association of Planning Students conference on research that I thought was appropriate to changing and innovating the way we do things in designing our cities. And so that led me on to CSI, where I became a community animator to help facilitate innovation, both as a social entrepreneur practicing and as almost like a coach, I guess you could call it. So CSI and CFI have these synergies together, where CSI is all about urban innovation and change making, where we have space, and then we have animation, bringing communities to life, and then the theory goes that that creates an innovative and conducive atmosphere and environment for ideas to be shared and for a network to be fluid. So the congruency between CSI, my life, Craig, all these different things led me on to CFI, and meeting Jeff was just kind of a natural choice. And I hope you're seeing the thread in the picture that I've been painting from that reinvention story I was telling you about, how I began kickboxing and just kind of following that intuition and that excitement. Because I feel like if you meet a change maker, they're not apathetic or depressed. They don't have no energy. They can't help but share the energy. So that to me, like all these people that I've been engaging, that's really all the influences that led me to CFI. I hope that answers your question.
So you're not an urban planner now?
No, I'm trained as an urban planner, but I never ended up being an urban planner.
And do you find this choice is what you prefer, obviously?
I think there's a
Bring more
difference.
change to society?
I think there's a fundamental belief system change in how our language associates what you are and what you aren't. If you associate leadership or making change with title and position, as you have to be an urban planner to design cities, that I think that is false. However, everything that I learned and everything that I was trained in, I use. And I love it. I love urban planning and I love urban planners and people who think that they're urbanists and architects and all that kind of stuff and designers. Because we all are creators. We all are designers in our own way. However, those who lead is a little bit different than leaders. Because of those who lead, you choose to follow or to be a leader and follow with them. But when you give power to leadership, to leaders with position, as in the only way I can make change is as an urban planner, for instance, then it becomes less fun. And you become less energetic. And the congruency and the speed at which you're able to share ideas becomes less innovative. And so for me, the natural, intuitive choice was to follow my nose and just make change happen, despite whatever leadership or positional title I may or may not have. I hope that answered your question as well.
So I guess that
Thanks.
sort of begs the question, what led you to urban planning in the first place? Because you were already on that path, like change.
That's a great question. Demi can answer that way at the back. I told him earlier on, so. No, well, unless you want to. No, you don't have to.
You can fill in the parts I got wrong.
Cool.
So that way. So yeah, he was walking around downtown one day and he was just bored and he stumbled into this building and this guy with white hair, gray white hair, who just so happened to be the I guess the inventor of the Ryerson urban planning program, was upstairs in the building and he invited him to stay and talk with his urban planning friend, and for 2 hours they had a conversation, and at that time he had absolutely no interest in urban planning, or he wasn't even interested in Toronto in the first place. He actually didn't like Toronto, and I
We're
guess
supposed to tell that part.
okay, sorry. But now he likes Toronto, which is why he's here. But so I guess after the 2 hour conversation, they somehow convinced him to go down that path, and he's never seen that guy ever again. And that guy made a huge ripple in his life, but that's what happens, I guess.
Thanks, Demi, for remembering that.
Did I understand it?
Any more questions? What a beautifully told story.